So I just saw the Lion King remake, and these are my thoughts on it. So before we start, I need to mention that I am making a bigger review, another Ranter Chan. I'm gonna be reviewing a few Netflix movies that'll come out hopefully by the end of the month. So we have that to look forward to. Alright, so on to the Lion King. It is getting a lot of mixed reviews. Some people either love it because it's basically the same thing, or they hate it because it's basically the same thing. But the thing is, I try not to just hate something outright. So starting off with the good things, I think on a purely technical level, this movie is amazing. Because the level of realism that they brought to making these animals look photorealistic and make sure that they behave like real life animals, it really is a marvel to behold. So the animation is great, and I also like a lot of people in the cast. Like, some of them are very good in their roles, and some of them are very weak in their roles, but I like a lot of them, so I'll get into that segment later. I like the singing. The music wasn't anything original because it's basically being used all over again, but I like the singing. You can tell the actual singers are singing these songs and doing a good job with them. Except for Be Prepared. Chiwetel Ejiofor, please get goddamn singing lessons. I remember Timon and Pumbaa being pretty funny. I especially liked how their humor was almost self-aware. Like, at the end of seeing Hakuna Matata, Pumbaa says, "Hey Simba, you got like 400 pounds bigger since we started." You know, stuff like that. So they're kind of acknowledging the fact that this is such a phenomenon and what's going on in terms of what I'm perceiving in the movie, so well, that was a little something. And then there were about one or two new additions to the story that I liked a lot. I feel like those were, like, one of those new additions was actually the best part of the movie, because it was basically doing its own thing and doing a pretty solid job at it. It's the scene where Nala is grown up, still in the Pride Lands with Scar as king, and it's a very interesting side of the story that we haven't seen, so yeah, I like that. It was different and I liked it. The thing is, I don't doubt for a second that the people working on this movie cared. You can tell that these people were completely devoted to making sure that this remake was as faithful to the original as possible. Like, down to the way actors act their lines, to the way that shots are done. Like, they do a lot of the same shots from the original. And this is where I get into the bad stuff. The fact that this is basically an almost shot-for-shot remake of the original, with almost no originality to it whatsoever, it hinders the movie quite a bit. Like, when you think of the best movie remakes out there, like, off the top of my head, there's John Carpenter's The Thing, or Suspiria that came out last year, the Coen brothers' True Grit, among others that I can't think of right now because I'm stupid. Like, those movies, they were faithful to the original, but at the same time, they were such their own thing. Not just from a visual standpoint, but from a storytelling standpoint. Like, the makers of those films, they really did their work and put their own stamp on it. And throughout The Lion King, you can tell that the director Jon Favreau is trying to put his type of stamp on it. He's doing this thing where he allows the actors to improvise a little bit to allow for a more natural comedic scene. And sometimes it works, but at the same time, Disney is breathing down his neck and telling him basically, make the same movie. So in the end, we're left with basically a soulless shot-for-shot version of The Lion King that has none of the charm or even originality of the original. Like, a lot of the best elements of that movie are stripped away for realism, I guess, because that's the gimmick, that this is all realistic, photorealistic animation. And that leads me into my first complaint, is that I think that the photorealistic animation is brilliant when it comes to how the animals look, like they look like actual animals, but at the same time, that basically robs these characters from physically emoting to this very emotional story. And that took me out of it, which is a horrible thing. How am I supposed to care that Mufasa is dead when Simba, as a cub, isn't reacting to it in any way? Like, you can tell that the actor is really trying, but his face is just like, "Dad, we gotta go home. Dad." I think that the only animals that were allowed to react in some way were the hyenas, because they at least laugh. Another thing that I thought was very was the performance of the cast. As I just said, I like everyone in this cast. Everyone. And a lot of them really do try. I think that the best ones are Donald Glover, Seth Rogen, Billy Eichner, the Florence Kasumba, Eric Andre, and Keegan-Michael Key, who play the hyenas. Eric Andre is in the movie. He's underused. And, Alfred Woodard. That's it. That's it. Basically, everyone else in the cast, like John Oliver and Beyonce, and who's the third kid's name? J.D. McCarty and Hardy Wright Jackson. I hope I really didn't mess up their names. Those actors have moments where they shine, but at the same time, they have moments where their line delivery is just so weirdly done. It's like, you couldn't have gotten a better take out of these people? Chiwetel Ejiofor as Scar, who I was scared was going to be the weakest actor in the whole thing. Even he had some moments where he got to shine, but at the same time, he wasn't great in the role. And he especially was not good during the Be Prepared number, where he basically just talked his way through and then sang a little bit. Like, you couldn't have gotten singing lessons for that? But surprisingly, the worst actor, actually not worst, I won't say worst, but the weakest, like, the weakest actor was a shock to me. It was James Earl Jones as Mufasa. He basically said every line so passively and in the same tone. He's angry. You've been warned, Shenzi. He's calm. We are all connected in the great circle of life. You know, it's stuff like that that really bothered me. I feel like James Earl Jones cared the least out of these actors. Like, he was a part of the original, and in that original film, you can tell that he really gave it his all. But for this new one, he basically came in like, yeah, I'm gonna read my lines, I'm gonna do a decent job, but then I'm gonna go home. And everyone's just awestruck that it's James Earl Jones, that they forget to tell him, hey, read this a little bit differently. Believe me, I feel bad about saying this, but I just thought that everything he said was so bland. There was even a moment in the film where, I could be wrong about this, but when he says the line in the movie, "If you ever come near my son again," I could have sworn that was taken directly from the original film and put into this one. Like, they couldn't get a line delivery from him in his current age that sounded threatening enough like that, so they just took it from the original film. And this movie really padded itself out by trying to get to be 30 minutes longer than the original film. But most of what that 30 minutes comprised of were scenes that were either extended so long or shortened in pace. Like the scene where Nala and Simba meet, like they instantly recognize each other. There's no time to really build on their reunion in a meaningful way like the original did. It's just like, Nala? Simba? Oh, before I forget, Can You Feel the Love Tonight was done entirely in the daytime. It makes no goddamn sense. And then you have the scenes that are extended unbelievably long for whatever reason I can speculate. There's the scene where in the original Simba lies on the ground and then some dust flies into the air and finds its way to Rafiki. Quick scene, right? But in this new one, Simba calmly lies down, a piece of his mane falls off, it floats around for a while, falls into the river, is picked up by a bird, taken to a tree, and then it falls onto a branch, which is then eaten by a giraffe, and the piece of mane is shitted out into a giraffe ball piece of shit, and then rolled around by a beetle, and then the ball breaks. I'm struggling to remember exactly what happened. And then I think the air carried it some more, and then an ant caught it, and then it found its way into Rafiki's tree, and then Rafiki got the little piece of hair that had just been shitted out by a giraffe, and that's how we know Simba is alive? Doesn't that sound like the most stretched out shit you've ever heard in your life? And there were also several new additions that didn't feel like they went well with the entirety of the film. Like, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, Timon and Pumbaa start making it an entire musical number with the other animals, and then Nala just attacks them. I don't know what to think about that. And then there's that scene with the Beyonce song, Spirit. It's just shoved in there and doesn't feel like it belongs at all. Like, I heard that Beyonce took that song in to be used for the end credits, but instead the filmmakers felt like, no, we need to put this in the movie. And they did, but it's shoved in there. And I honestly think it would have worked better if it was the end credits instead of that poppy Elton John song. Like, I like Elton John and the song is fine, but it doesn't belong as the first song in the end credits. I'm struggling to think of what else I liked and disliked, because it's all such a blur, because it's basically the same thing as the original. There's no originality to it. The emotional core of the story basically got robbed with the fact that all of these animals they look like actual animals and they can't react to it. And it's just a bad movie. I will say that I didn't hate it, and that it's better than something like Aladdin, where every choice was for the worse. I'll get into that a little later. But yeah, this movie is basically soulless. Like, you could tell that everyone who made it was distracted by the fact that they loved The Lion King, so they didn't really put in enough effort to make their own mark on it. And the business guys at Disney are breathing down their neck and making sure that it is the same thing, so that they can market it out and rely on people's love for the original Lion King for people to go see it and make $1 billion, which it absolutely will, in my opinion. And at the end of the day, it's sad, because we have all these great movies coming out every year, all these small movies that are basically left to the side, and they go by unnoticed by audiences because we have to see The Lion King except it's live action. We have to see Aladdin except it stars Will Smith as the genie. But that's the world we live in now for us film lovers. It's a 4 out of 10, which is exactly what I was expecting it to be. It just didn't need to exist. I don't know if I am ever going to see it again, to be honest, because the original is so filled with life compared to this one, which basically steals from that life. I honestly feel bad having to shit on this film, which people have spent 3 years of their lives making. But, when you make a bad movie, you make a bad movie. So, It's my job and other people's jobs to point that out. Although I will say this, Cats looks much worse.